I think today you'll be very pleased with what we talk about. How Zach was saying, you can work with him more if you want to do more real estate stuff. I call Zach an expander because he expands possibilities for people that we weren't even like, you might not even be aware that it's a possibility for you. And so we're going to talk about that today, because one thing that gets in the way of us not being aware of the possibilities for us is our ego. And we've talked about ego a little bit in previous classes, but we're going to go a little bit deeper into it today. And I wanted to do this now because we're still kind of coming off of that New Year energy. The last two classes have been around New Year's and energetic shifts around goals with that. And so what can come up when you are exploring new goals and you're setting these visions for yourself of this is what I want to accomplish this year or within the next 3 years or within the next month, whether that's an income goal or a property goal or a relationship goal or a weight goal. It doesn't matter. Energetics is the same across the board. So insert whatever area it is for you. And let's just play with that with our imagination here. So what most people don't realize is that our ego, it is not a bad thing. It's something that protects us, but it protects us in a way that it keeps us in this safe space, so to speak. But you cannot live without your ego. So if you're in a spiritual community or you're new to the spiritual space, you might hear the term ego death. And we don't want to kill our ego. That's just a term that means part of your identity that you once identified with, you no longer identify with that. And with that comes lots of interesting experiences in the body. And a perfect example for this is, it's 11:11 right now where we're at, by the way. Perfect example for this is leaving a relationship. So leaving a long-term relationship. We formed an identity of who we are with our partner. We formed an identity of how we show up with our partner, or whether maybe your relationship is a job. You formed an identity of how you show up each day, what you wear. And so leaving the relationship or that job, we go through the breakup, but we're not just grieving the loss of the relationship. We're grieving the loss of who we were within the relationship. Because now what do we say? Oh, I have to learn how to date again. I don't even know what my type is anymore. I don't know how to show up on a date. You are learning who you are again. You're literally creating a new identity. And this is the identity is our ego. So an ego death is like we've left that part of us behind, and now we are becoming something new. We're always doing this. We are always doing this. Just in sometimes, especially as an entrepreneur, you're experiencing this probably a lot more than the average person. And so this is why we wanted to talk about this. But essentially your ego, it is a mental and emotional expression of your nervous system. And so it's showing up for you based on how your nervous system feels entering a new space. And just know that you are not your ego. You are the awareness of it. Because if you were your ego, you would have died when you left that relationship. You're still here. We've all broken up with people before. We're all still here. So you're not your ego. You're not that voice in your head.
Yeah. So I always hear someone say, when I hear the word ego, I usually hear, oh, you're so egotistical. You're so full of yourself, like probably in line with you're such a jerk.
Yeah. And we hear ego like it's a bad thing. Like, oh, yeah, well, I don't want to be that, or I don't want to be like the jerk or the egoic person. But ego, it can be a bad thing when we lean on it too much, but it's ultimately a protector of us. And it's how we identify ourselves. So it's all in how we approach it.
Yeah. And you're saying it's those emotions that are coming through in that moment. So if they're coming through from that clouded space, from a negative, from a trauma type of past, well, then you could be a jerk just because, you've gone through those things in the past and you felt that emotional connection in the past. So now you're projecting that emotional feeling out there in the world.
About before the thinking feeling loop. And so those emotions trigger thoughts, and those thoughts might trigger things like, well, I'm more important than this person, and that's comparison, and we're going to talk about this later in this call too, or like, well, I'm better than that person. And that's the ego. Anything that says I first, separation, is the ego. So when we act from trauma, then it's like, well, either I'm not that type of person or I'm going to be the best person that there is. And so people can form identities around a trauma. And just so you know, this is advanced. So I'm not going to go too far into this, but they can form identities around the trauma and then show up in that very egoic space. So we know someone's acting from ego when they're all like, well, I'm better than you, because they are separating themselves. They're saying but then they're saying better than. So that actually means that they're acting out through insecurities that they feel less than. They don't feel good enough. So they're over exemplifying their ego to show people, well, I'm better than you, because the ego is trying to protect that insecurity of not feeling good enough.
Yeah. So when I get that feeling, maybe they don't even verbally say, I am better than you, or I am better than these other people. But when I notice that type of reaction on someone, that they're projecting that out into the world, I am instantly turned away from that type of person. I don't want to associate with that. So I would rather all of you have a wonderful relationship with your ego, and we can all do deals together. I'm all about making everyone great around us. You know, there's that notion of, there's many people that like to carve out what we're going to do, have our little section of pie. Like, here's a pie, you know, here's the opportunity. How much are we going to get of that pie? Well, I say, screw all that. Let those people fight over the pie. Let's go build a pie factory over here. Right. And then, like, after that, let's build more pie factories. Now we can feed all those people that are going after those little bits of piece of pie. So it's a shift. And I want to be around those people that have that good shift, because it just makes life easier, happy, more calm and easeful, and just everything I want in my life for part of my personal vision. You can take some of that if you want, or you can hang out with those people that think they're better than everyone, if that's what you like to do for now. But
so what Zach is trying to explain is what the ego is, and it boxes you in. And so it's it's that separation, that I'm better than thou, or I'm different than, I'm not good enough as, either they're better than me. So still separating yourself. And it is this, either it can be a positive or a negative sense of self. The ego is how we learn who we are. It's how we self-identify. And it's our collection of stories of what makes us us. So for an example, if you had a traumatic experience, whether capital T, like a death or abuse in the family, or a lowercase t, like a rejection on the playground, which felt like a capital T when you were a little kid. And then we can create stories about who we are. So for an example, if I approach someone on the playground when I'm in 7th grade and they say, ew, a girl, get away from me, then I'm like, oh, wow, people don't like me. I'm going to be rejected if I go up to someone. So then I create an identity to protect myself, that it's not safe for me to approach other people. That might then bleed into him being a real estate investor, calling people, calling wholesalers, calling private money lenders, and being scared to reach out to them in fear of rejection. So these ideologies that our ego creates, the stories that it tells us we are, they bleed into different areas of our life. So something could have happened on the playground when I was 12 years old, but now in my life, in my career, I have to reach out to people to benefit my career, but my ego is trying to protect me, saying it's not safe, you're going to get rejected, because my little 12-year-old heart was broken. And so we have to learn how to work with our ego and not see it as a bad thing, but see it as a protector, because it tells us this is what you're good at. This is what you're bad at. This is what's true about the world. This is what's false about the world. How many of us heard our parents say something along the lines of, well, money doesn't grow on trees, or you need to work harder if you want to, if you want some stuff around here, you got to earn it, and stuff like that. So we learned that hard work equals money. Money's not everywhere. Mind you, money is an energy. It literally is anywhere. We can create it. We receive the money through paper and other people, but money is a frequency. It's an energy. And so we heard our parents say these things. So then our parents also condition our ego beliefs of who we are, who I am, what's my place in the world. So this is why people who grow up in lower income or lower middle class, it's harder for them to get out of that income status, because they've been just conditioned to believe this is how the world works. This is who I am. So if you can get out of that income status and you can really make a life for yourself, you have transcended that ego, that part of your identity that says, I make this much money. My family makes this much money. The story that says money is hard to come by. And then that's when other people can say, well, you've changed or whatever, and other fears can get in the way. But we won't go into that right now. But this is just what happens is based on past events that have happened to us and past evidence, our ego creates this idea of, this is who I am. This is my place in the world. These are the stories that I believe to be true or I believe to be false about how the world works. And it is what it is. And the ego doesn't like to be challenged, because this is why we have our comfort zones, even if it's not anything but comfortable. So our comfort zone could be in a toxic relationship, even though it's not comfortable. It feels really scary to leave that relationship, right? So sometimes our ego keeps us in places that seem safe, but are anything but safe, because the ego is about survival. So if you are surviving, your ego is happy, and you can't be on a frequency of surviving and thriving. It's one or the other, because we need different resources from the body in order to thrive. And when we are just surviving, the resources that our body is outputting to survive are going to be different than the ones that we need to thrive. And I talked a little bit about this in the last video as well. But I wanted you to share, because you're an expander. And so how our ego, it identifies us based on past evidence. It tells us this is who I am. So when we want to try something new, it can be very challenging.